on this edition of the Days of Our PhD Lives.
Miguel, I have a problem. One of my references wasn't in APA 6th edition. We interrupt the ending to your regularly scheduled program with breaking STEM education news. High school Algebra 1, Physical Science, and English courses may not be required for all high school students in the near future, according to the work of several STEM PhD students. A group of exceptional learning PhD students have convened in their STEM education courses to think the unthought and reconsider the high school requirements that have been in place for over 120 years. These original requirements were set by the Committee of 10 in 1892 in order to establish a liberal arts education for all students. The group of PhD students are reconsidering the requirements that all students should have to complete in order to graduate. Questions such as, do all students need Algebra 1? And should students be required to take a math class more suited to the profession they believe they will choose, are filling the discussions happening during the class meetings. The STEM PhD students know that any major changes to the over 120-year trend set by the Committee of 10 would be a daunting task for educators, administrators, and policymakers. The goal of the PhD students is to update the requirements for high school education to better improve students' 21st century workforce skills, STEM literacy, and ability to make decisions as informed, well-rounded citizens of the United States. We will have more on this story as decisions are made by this group of students as they develop their thinking and craft documents to better inform education in the United States and across the globe. Today on STEM 1 News, we investigate trends in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, along with overall trends in STEM education. Then, we will take a look at our STEM education forecast for years to come. At this time, we thank you for joining us for our regularly scheduled news program. Today, we begin our regularly scheduled news broadcast with an update on science education. We find ourselves in the midst of a standards reform era, and new educational standards are being adopted with updated content, more emphasis on STEM disciplines, and requirements of activities and lessons that are believed to better prepare students for life after school and develop their 21st century workforce skills. Activities and lessons developed under the new standards reflect a trend for more hands-on learning and inquiry-based learning, reminiscent of the push for hands-on science back in the 1950s and 60s, just after the launch of the Russian satellite Sputnik into orbit. And these lessons mimic authentic thinking that researchers in STEM fields practice. The next generation science standards, based on the National Research Council's publication, A Framework for K-12 Science Education, were published in 2013 and adopted by several states in the U.S. Tennessee opted to create their own standards based on the K-12 framework as well. The Tennessee Academic Standards for Science will go into effect in classrooms all across the state of Tennessee in the 2018-2019 school year. These standards focus on the integration of disciplinary core ideas, or the science content, cross-cutting concepts such as pattern, scale, and proportion that cut across all science disciplines, and science and engineering practices like developing an argument based on evidence or developing a model. The trends of standards adoption for science courses all across the nation is indicative of another major trend that we're seeing, the integration of STEM disciplines into K-12 instruction. We're here today with Kelly Moore, the Science Education Lecturer in the College of Education at Tennessee Tech, for more on current science education trends. So, Ms. Moore, how long have you been teaching?
Well, I taught in the classroom, mostly high school chemistry, some biology for a little over 10 years. And then I have been at Tennessee Tech for 6 years, I believe. So I've been in education for about, this will be my 17th year.
All right. And can you tell us about the overall trends you've seen in the landscape of science education over your career?
Sure. I think coming through high school as a student, the trend was, here's your textbook, read this chapter, do these problems, and then we might have some kind of experience at the end of a unit doing a lab. We always had to do science projects, and so we would enter science projects in the science fair. So that was kind of our only, I guess, exposure to anything that was inquiry-based or student-centered per se. And then as a teacher, it was really hard for me to kind of break out of that mold. So still, my early years in education, still a lot of lecture, a lot of kind of drill, the I do, we do, you do kind of structure. And through that period of time, my early career and my experience as a student, science really was very similar to other classes. So it was learning information, learning about science. And the trends that I see now with the new standards and the way that teachers are really trying to branch out and teach science is trying to get students engaged in doing science. So instead of learning about science and about historical science experiments, it's taking students through science and saying, well, how would we figure this out? And almost trying to get students to kind of go through the steps that we have gone through historically to discover.
How do you think that those science education trends fit in with the movement toward more integrated STEM courses?
Oh, I think, it fits seamlessly. We want our students to engage in practices, but the practices that scientists use are very similar to the practices that engineers use. Scientists are usually trying to figure out more about how the world works, so they're trying to kind of find that information out. Engineers are trying to solve a problem, but they're still asking questions, and they're still coming up with ideas, and there's still a lot of creativity in that. And so I think the practices that we're trying to get students to engage in science class are very similar to what you would see engineers doing in the field. I think that we're expecting students to use math and use mathematical reasoning and that computational thinking, like how are we going to treat these numbers in order to find an answer to this science question that we have. So we're expecting students to use math. Math is not something that just works in the math classroom. It's something that students, shockingly, I know students sometimes don't, they're amazed by that. Like, this is a science class, why am I going to use math? But math is something that works everywhere, amazingly enough. And so trying to get students to use that math and bring that math into the classroom. And the integration of technology and all of that. We have so much technology at our fingertips that we didn't have when I was a student. I just got back from...
Right. Well, thank you very much for your interview today.
Thank you, Brittany. Indeed, there has been some movement lately in the field of technology education. A noticeable push for the inclusion of real-life contexts in technology education curricula has been taking place since the publication of the Standards for Technological Literacy by the ITEA back in 2000. The idea is to help our children develop the skills necessary to contribute to society by becoming effective participants in the growing STEM workforce of the United States. Ironically, in order to meet the current and future needs of the country, educators are promoting the use of not very new ideas like problem solving and strategies such as guided inquiry, which already in the 1900s experienced a push by professionals like John Dewey, the father of instrumentalism. What is new about the trends currently underway is the inclusion of the grand challenges for engineering posed by the National Academy of Engineering as providers of these meaningful real-life contexts that both teachers and students strive for. And speaking of the grand challenges for engineering, we have our special correspondent Megan Clemens at the White House in Washington, D.C., ready to tell us more about the current situation of STEM in general and engineering education in particular. Megan?
This is Megan Clemens reporting live from Washington, D.C. in front of the beautiful White House. In engineering education news, we are in the midst of grand challenges of engineering, working as the integrator of STEM education. The grand challenges are goals for improving life on our planet. There are 14 separate topics. One of these topics includes advanced personalized learning. Traditionally, students were taught in a classroom by a teacher with a one-size-fits-all approach. Using advanced personalized learning consists of developing teaching methods that are individualized to each student. This can help students learn according to their needs. Another example from the grand challenges of engineering is providing access to clean water. The benefits of this challenge is improving overall health and sustainability for communities in third world countries. This is where clean water is not readily available. One of the other topics is prevention of nuclear terror. This has obvious advantages. National security has been an ongoing trend from the beginning of the nuclear age. The prevention of nuclear terror is one of the more urgent policy issues of the 21st century. In addition, nuclear security complicates the use of nuclear energy for other purposes, such as generating electricity. Although these are considered engineering challenges, we must also overcome the political and cultural challenges of each topic in order to work together to solve the issues of the world. These 14 grand challenges for engineering give the opportunity for students to solve problems of real-world issues. For example, in the STEM Academy in Savannah, Georgia, teachers and administrators choose one grand challenge for the entire school to focus on for one full year. The students learn how to research the topics and integrate all silos of STEM education in the endeavor of solving the challenge. At the end of the year, the students present their findings in front of the entire school. This challenge teaches students how science, technology, engineering, and mathematics are connected in a real-world application. In turn, students will leave middle school understanding how to apply their knowledge beyond the classroom. The trend of STEM schools using the grand challenges of engineering are challenging students with real-world issues and allowing them to solve these problems using the integration of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. This will help our students to be better prepared for the real world and have a better confidence in taking on the large challenges due to understanding firsthand the process of problem solving. Hear more about STEM education trends after the commercial break.
Does your daughter have an appreciation for science? Does she have a fascination with technology? Does she have a desire to engineer designs? Or does she have an affinity for mathematics, in line with the trend set by the Summer Math for Girls program established in 1983? The STEM for Girls program provides a wonderful opportunity for your daughter. Send her to STEM for Girls, a summer camp to help her increase her STEM understanding, develop her STEM skills, and explore STEM careers of interest to her. It's a STEM experience she'll never forget.
Welcome back to STEM 1 News, your favorite, most reliable source of information on STEM education. It is the time for us to talk about everyone's favorite silo, mathematics. Among the main trends mathematics education has been experiencing in the last years, the everlasting battle between procedural and conceptual approaches to instruction has, of course, been an underlying factor impacting mathematics education reform. These trends include some we have already talked about today, such as problem solving, which has been fostered in many states and even at a national level by the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, following the international example set by Asian and Northern European countries, which led the ranks of the Program of International Student Assessment, in which the United States is placed at a not very impressive 35th place. Another trend gaining importance is the implementation of integrated mathematics curricula in high schools throughout the nation. These substitute the traditional Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2 traditional sequence with integrated mathematics 1, 2, and 3. These are meant to enhance a student's conceptual understanding by approaching mathematical ideas from different perspectives and taking advantage of the interconnections among them. Research on teachers' experiences and beliefs of integrated mathematics is being carried in universities such as Tennessee Technological University, who will shed some light on its effectiveness. We will keep you updated on these and other trends in future reports. Now, over to Brittany with our STEM weather forecast.
Thank you, Miguel. As you can see, we've been tracking STEM education across the timeline for several years. We've seen big movements in equality for minorities and women in work and education since the late 1960s, and we've seen a big shift toward the desire to understand how culture affects students' learning with the introduction of ethnomathematics in the 1980s. We've also seen shifts in the idea of tracking in educational and engineering education and shifts toward the industrial arts era, with educational sloyd from the apprenticeship era in which one person trained under another for an extended period of time. Sputnik, launched by the Soviet Russians in 1957, propelled the United States into a space race, with emphasis on mathematics and science instruction, funded by organizations like the National Science Foundation. U.S. competition with other nations is still continuing on today. The National Commission on Excellence in Education published A Nation at Risk in 1983, indicating that the state of education in the United States was perilous and not stacking up against global competitors. This trend has culminated into a publication titled Rising Above the Gathering Storm, in which the claim is made that coordinated federal efforts must be made in order to be competitive with our global neighbors. In order to become more competitive in the global workforce and marketplace, we've seen another major shift. The major trend we've seen is the adoption of standards, beginning in 1989 with the publication of NCTM's Standards for Curriculum and Evaluation of Mathematics, and leading up to the adoption of the Tennessee Academic Standards for Science in 2016. With hopes of improving Tennessee education and U.S. education and propelling the U.S. to be competitive in STEM fields. So what does all of this mean for our future? Our 7-year forecast of STEM trends leads us to believe that more integration of STEM courses will emerge, and an emphasis on integrated STEM will continue to be incorporated into K-12 education, with the hopes of developing students' STEM literacy and workforce skills, and moving the United States to the forefront in STEM in a globally competitive arena.
Thank you for joining us today on this trendy edition of STEM 1 News.
So who's going to sing it? It's raining STEM! Hallelujah! It's raining STEM!
Taking place since the
NCTM Standards for Curriculum and Evaluation of